I'll tell you what's important. It's important that when people get elected, they recognize why they were sent. And when Bob Clegg got to the legislature here in New Hampshire, he didn't quit believing what he believed. In fact, he just kept doing the right thing day after day. When he's elected to Congress, he won't go and forget why he went and who sent him. And that's why it is a distinct pleasure and honor for me to stand with him tonight and to present to you the next congressman for this district, for the state of New Hampshire. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Congressman Bob Clegg.
Thank you. Now, those of you who know me know I've been a little short on words today. You can understand why. How do you follow that? Mike and I have been good friends. We met over the strangest thing. Mike came up to do some speeches after he was done being governor of Arkansas, and he'd never seen a motorcycle with a Senate plate. So he walked up and he said, "Exactly how do you get one of those here?" And we became friends from that day forward. Before I start, I need to point out that my wife is here. Priscilla, you want to raise your hand? She's with my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and I like to brag that my father-in-law was one of the original 10th Mountain troops that liberated Italy, and every 3 or 4 years they go back, and believe it or not, Italians still remember what Americans did, and they still close down the streets, they still have giant feasts and welcome the soldiers back who gave them their life. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Most of you know I grew up in Nashua. My first political job was the shoe shine boy at Panagula's Shoe in Nashua, right next to City Hall. That's where I learned that I could shine shoes, make good money, and learn all about what was going on in City Hall because the mayor and all the aldermen came on. I then worked at Greenbrier Nursing Home when my dad was sick. I had a full-time job. I worked maintenance, 40 hours a week while I was in high school. Maintenance was a fancy word for I washed the floors. My wife also worked there, and we met because she was baking cookies in the kitchen one day. I was washing the floor outside, and who would guess that some young kid who was washing the floor would actually follow the smell of chocolate chip cookies into the kitchen and meet his future wife. We've been married 34 years. She still bakes a mean chocolate chip cookie, too. I didn't have a chance to go to college, but my wife went to college. We had a daughter, then we had a son. And I have to tell you that I worked very hard in the construction industry to make sure that both my daughter and my son were able to go to college. I'm very proud of the fact that my daughter's a teacher. She teaches 7th grade at Hudson Memorial School. She has, I think she tells me, 6 classes of 32 children, and she does very well, and she has a few of those kids here tonight. My son went to college. He got a degree in psychology and found out that he liked film better, even though psychology pays better. We won't pick on him. But I live the American dream. I have gone all the way from being one of 7 in a very poor family to someone who owned a successful business, who was able to put his family through college, who built his own house, who went to Concord in the legislature because I could no longer be in business. In the 90s, workers' comp was so expensive that most of us were either going to move to a different state or just give up. And I remember going to my legislators and they saying to me, "Kid," and yeah, I was a kid back then, it was 14 years ago. He said, "Kid, if you think you can do a better job, why don't you go up there?" So I did. And the first year I went there, there was a group of us, and we rewrote the workers' comp statute so that we could all be in business. Not only could we be in business, but everybody that worked for us could continue to have a job, and that was more important than anything. And for the next 14 years, I stayed there. Every year there seemed to be one more thing that working families needed, that businesses needed, that the working person needed. I spent 8 years in the House of Representatives. I worked my way up. I was a caucus whip. I was assistant majority leader. When I left, I was speaker pro tem. And I have to tell you, when I decided to move over to the Senate, I thought, boy, no more leadership for me. I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to go over there, just sit back, and we'll have a nice time. My first year in the Senate, my peers chose me to be the majority leader, and they tell me it's the first time in history that a first-term senator was ever made majority leader. I spent 4 years as majority leader, and you all know what happened in the last election. People got mad. They got mad at the wrong person, and they decided, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. And you know what happened. We elected people who had put their names on the ballot just to fill in a slot, who never had any intentions of ever coming to the State House, who just decided that, well, what the heck. They would come up and they would vote whenever it meant a tax increase, more spending, and in this state we ended up with a 17% increase in our spending, something we couldn't afford. At the same time, what they did was they threw out two good congressmen who listened to the people here, who didn't spend their time bickering, pointing fingers, blaming somebody else, two people who actually tried to get the job done. I'm telling you today, I want to go to Washington for the same reason I went to Concord. When they said, if you think you can do a better job, why don't you come up here and do it? I think I can do a better job in Washington than Paul Hodes, and that's why I want to go to Washington. I want to bring your values, your way of life, and I want to let them know in Washington that we can no longer afford for them to pay for everything on a credit card and expect us and our kids to pay for it later. Let me just read you a few facts, because I find this interesting. As I told you, I did not go to college, and I'm not ashamed. I worked my way up from the bottom. And when people say to me, and there are people out there that say, well, how then can you be qualified to be in Washington? Let me read this. Right now, Washington's full of people with a lot of advanced degrees. There's 114 members of Congress who have master's degrees. 23 have PhDs. 17 are doctors, 240 are lawyers, and 3 are Rhodes Scholars. So why can't they balance the budget?
They have no common sense.
They have no common sense. When I go to Washington, I'm going to bring New Hampshire common sense down to all those people with all those degrees, and hopefully America will once again be as prosperous as our grandparents had always intended it to be. Thank you very much for coming tonight.